Deputy Tommy Broughan, please.
Taoiseach, I think over the last few weeks there's been a lot of reflection on your political career and what happened under your governments. And I want to focus for a few minutes on what I think was a very bad decision by your government in the brutal budget of 2012, which of course I strongly opposed. And you remember, Taoiseach, in that particular budget, the PRSI contribution rates, where we had 4 down through the decades, they were expanded to 6, and those people with average contributions of between 20 and 47 suffered very significantly. Those people have become pensioners since 2012, and of course that you then gratuitously also cut the pensions of people who had between 10 and 20 contributions. A lot of my women constituents, senior women constituents who suffered most from this, they often refer to these changes as petty and sneaky. And Professor Alan Barrett, of course, rightly said that what you did was you changed the rules of the game in the middle of the game. I was reminded of this great injustice a few weeks ago when Age Action published the report, and I quote, towards a fair state pension for women pensioners, research by Ms Maureen Bassett, which clearly demonstrates the hugely negative impact of these changes, especially on senior women workers who have retired since 2012 and on those who will retire in coming years. A total of almost 40,000 citizens, Taoiseach, in the lower 4 bands were adversely affected up to June 2016. Nearly 2/3 of those pensioners are women. And typically, at current budget 2017 contributory pension rates, people in Band 3, averaging 30 to 39 contributions a year, lose €19 a week. People in Band 4, averaging 20 to 29 contributions, lose €30 a week. People in Band 5, averaging 15 to 19, lose €23 a week. And people in Band 6, averaging 10 to 14 contributions over their working life, lose €23.50. Now, Taoiseach, the pension problem, of course, for women workers who have been born from the late 1940s, that generation, your own generation, is, of course, exacerbated by the averaging method over the whole employment history from age 16 used to calculate contributory pensions. Many women in this cohort, of course, have interrupted contribution histories since they worked for periods in the late 1960s, 1970s and early 1980s, and then were in home caring duties for perhaps up to another 2 decades before they returned to the workforce. Your government, of course, have also consistently refused to backdate the homemaker scheme beyond 1994, the doubling of the necessary number of stamps, which Fianna Fáil, of course, was involved in as well, to 520, has also gravely disadvantaged this cohort of women. And as many of my own affected constituents note, the marriage bar was in place up to 1973, and they reared families in an era of little or no children. So I'm asking you, Taoiseach, first and foremost, is it not a time over the next number of years to begin a restoration of the pension entitlements of that cohort, the cohort that were born in the late 1940s? We've had Haddington Road, Lansdowne Road, we had the junior doctors this morning. And could I ask you perhaps initially to ask the chairperson of the Budgetary Oversight Committee to urgently examine the detrimental impacts of the contribution ban changes and to begin bringing forward a process of restoration, and indeed also to set up the interdepartmental committee which Age Action asks for, to work towards a universal state pension and also for caring credits.
Thank you, Deputy.
Thanks, Ken.
Deputy Broughan's question is perfectly valid, and that's part of the sacrifices that people put up with over the last number of years in order to bring the economy back to a safer place than it used to be. I agree, of course. This is a budgetary matter, and is one that has to be reflected on over the next number of budgets. Clearly, Deputy, the process by which the budget for 2018 will be constructed is starting now. The Minister for Public Expenditure has made a number of comments about this, as has the Minister for Finance, in terms of the FEMPI legislation, in terms of the successor to the Lansdowne Road Agreement, and the points that you mentioned here are so valid for so many people. This morning the government noted that the Social Insurance Fund has a surplus of over 400 million for the first time in very many years, and obviously that's an issue where money in surplus will have to be dealt with, and a full review of that's being carried out as well. So clearly, with the Low Pay Commission about to make their recommendations over the period ahead, the issue of PRSI and pensioners and those who are caught between 65 and 66 is obviously an issue as well. But to answer your question, this of course is where it's got to be dealt with. And you point out in timely fashion that here's an issue that needs to be looked at as the departments prepare their initial proposals for budget 2018. And of course, depending on the financial position that the ministers find themselves in, government will make decisions about how best to distribute that as a sense of fairness for everybody. And those who have taken the punishment that you've pointed out there are obviously ones who will be considered for whatever redemption can be made in the time ahead.
It's little comfort to particularly the two-thirds of the workers involved, the women workers and the other people who have been caught in this situation, Taoiseach, that they are bearing this burden week after week, all through the years, down into perhaps the next decade. And I noticed the Age Action Report, which I hope you've read or get a chance to read. It gives detailed case histories of women who have badly suffered from this savage cut, I think, from Budget 2012. One of my own constituents, Olive from Donaghmede, she says she's fuming with anger every week at the treatment of her generation, and she asks for accountability and immediate restoration of her pension. And she reminds me that every time I've raised this matter with Minister Varadkar, and I think I'm due to raise it again this afternoon, and my colleague Deputy Collins and I know Deputy Daly, Deputy O'Snoddy have raised it, Minister Varadkar always says, there are winners and there are losers. There are winners and there are losers. There should be no losers, Taoiseach, in relation to having a fair and equitable Tier 1 state pension for all men and women. I'd ask you, Taoiseach, to address the shocking losses for the thousands of pensioners involved. Just a final point, the lifetime loss for people at average age of life expectancy of 81. In Band 3, it's nearly €15,000, Taoiseach. It's €23,000 in Band 4, it's €18,000 in Band 5, and it's over €18,000 for Band 6. This is an appalling imposition on this very vulnerable group of our fellow citizens who work so hard, not just to work in the workplace. They were among the first workers. They were among the first workers, the women pensioners who went into the workforce and who also reared their families and looked at and cared for people. So I'd urge you, Taoiseach, take the steps I've said.
Taoiseach.
Thanks, Deputy. Well, I can understand that Olive from Donaghmede, who speaks for so many others, has a grievance here and they'd like that addressed. You mentioned about the Budgetary Oversight Committee here. I'll certainly have the chairman of the committee contacted to look at it from their point of view to see what recommendations they might make. Obviously, you'll raise this with the Minister for Social Protection later on when questions come up. But I would point out that government have looked very carefully, given the meagre amounts of money that we had over the last number of years and the constraints upon us, to look at those who were in the lower brackets, freedom from minimum wage requirements and freedom from income tax, and increases in minimum wages where they were recommended, as a sense of trying to bring about equity and fairness for so many people. So we'll have the issue referred for their consideration to the Oireachtas Committee in terms of budgetary oversight. Obviously, ministers will reflect on the preparation of the budget for 2018, and hopefully that Olive and so many others might be able to see some improvement in their position rising from the kind of situations that you referred to earlier.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Catherine Murphy.